is birth treated like a timed event? Who decides the strict schedule that we have to follow? And what happens when a woman does not follow the schedules or the baby doesn't come in that exact time? Welcome to Inner Compass. My name is Lovetti Lafua, and in today's episode we're going to break down one of the most difficult and I don't know what to even say, terrible myth when it comes about modern birthing. One of the most terrible things that happens when it comes to modern birthing. All right, before I even go any further, a quick spoiler, okay? The system isn't built for you. Its hospital is actually built on an old ancient time scientific research from the 1950s. So if you are thinking you want to have birth a certain way, however though, we are going to be diving into the history of childbirth, the whole pathogram history and how it came about in the first place, how the strict timeline actually leads to unnecessary interventions, as well as what we can do as birth keepers, nurses, midwives, doctors, whatever, to change the future of childbirth. If you are listening to this episode as a replay, make sure to write a comment below because, hey, that will keep the conversation going, right? And it's also very important for you to understand that we want everybody to get to this video as much as possible, especially the people who need it. So you want to click on the subscribe button and the notification button so that anytime I put anything online, you're going to get it. And the algorithm is going to send this video to the people who need it just like you. Let's dive right in. A little bit of crash course. In the 17th century, when men actually took charge of what you would call female body or the gynecology in general, what they did was to break it into timeline and measurement, and all in the name that this is actually a means of having an efficient care. Did it really happen that way? I'm not sure, but hey, we're going to go into this and then you have a better understanding of it. If you want to fast forward to today, the hospital still use that very rigid procedure, which is the first, second, and the third stage of a woman giving birth. Is this really the way it should be? I'm not sure though, but I have a different view when it comes to that. Regardless of where you study midwifery nowadays, you are taught that the first stage is the cervical dilation, the second stage is when the baby is born, and at the third stage is when the placenta is born. But here's the problem. Labor isn't normal, isn't a thing that is a linear thing. Every woman dilates differently. Some give birth in a pace of a very short time and others don't. Like hospitals don't like when they can't predict things. So what happens is they automatically want to schedule when the time of the baby is ready. So is this something that is done naturally? I don't know. I don't think so though. Drop a comment below if you know you have been told in the hospital, your doctor or a midwife even at home, that your labor was going too slow for some reason, okay? Make sure to drop a comment below because that would really interest me to know how many people have gone through this as well. Okay. The second thing is the pathogram. This is a system by which a labor is actually controlled, how fast or how slow it should go in the hospital. What actually baffles me about the pathogram is that it's something that started around the 1950s and we're still using it as today when we say science is discovery. Emmanuel Friedman did this in the 50s. He did it for just 500 women. Like we have millions of women on the planet, but he did it for the first 500 women. And this is the pathogram program that we have still using this day in the hospital. Guys, that's how ancient it is. You know, according to his study on 500 women from the millions of women on planet Earth, labor should progress 1 to 2 centimeters per hour. Do you know what that means? That means pressure automatically, especially for people who have gone to university schools to learn midwifery, me included, by the way. In my opinion, this is a very outdated way to do any kind of research. It is also highly medicalized, and also the women had little or no opportunity to reflect through their pain. So there was actually no physiological process in this case, and this was in the 50s. Here's another very terrible thing. Sometime in the 70s then, there became a kind of expansion where all the hospitals worldwide adapted this program, where you see the ups and downs, the labor is not going as it should, and sometimes you actually see failure to progress. Isn't it terrible enough to see that a body is said to fail to progress just by some lines on a paper that somebody did in the 50s? Is long dead. Okay, here is a reality. 1 centimeter per hour isn't fair. It's not a thing that is actually a norm. It can happen, but for very few women. Did you know that the World Health Organization doesn't even champion this whole partogram thing? Well, I'm sure you didn't, but no, they do not. I'm not a fan of WHO, but hey, in times like this, we want to really hold on to the people who we say are the ones dictating our health status quo, don't you think? Even though the World Health Organization doesn't adhere to it, women worldwide are still pressured to do this. Like, people are still using this intervention skill, this strategy, this system to judge the birthing process of a woman. Ironically, I call it really sad. For those who have watched this far, make sure you want to drop below. Tell me, when you told that your birth was too slow, like your birth is not going the way it should be by now, then you were actually using partogram. But hey, I want you to comment down below and tell me how it felt and what happened in your case. That will really make this video go more and more, so we have more things to discuss about. Now, what happens when labor does not meet to the hospital's time limit? A lot of things, like you will hear a lot of words that are actually, in my opinion, many of them are vague and not true, or people are just assuming them. The first thing that people are told is that we gotta break your water, so we speed up the process, and hey, it's got to move. But I'm gonna tell you something. Breaking the water is very, very little different from induction. It only just makes the labor a little bit stronger, and sometimes, or most times, become very, very irregular. So in that case, you're going to have more pain. You have little or less time to even walk through the pains. Don't forget that the contractions actually come with oxytocin, so the ability to adapt to the pain that you're getting, or the rushes, or whatever you call it. I like to call it contractions anyway. Although this is not something that happens very often, but breaking the water can actually lead to what we all don't want to hear: cesarean. Why? A very simple arithmetic will be, imagine having contractions in a way where a woman cannot handle the pain anymore, and then all she opts for is want to get this pain out of the way. We jump into epidural. When we get into on-call epidural, what happens is it does its job, and maybe most cases epidural leads to the other thing. It gives us the peace that we need, but then it also gives us a whole lot of costs at the end. You would also hear things like, oh, we're going to give you artificial, we're going to give you oxytocin. No, they're not giving you oxytocin. What they're giving you is Pitocin. Pitocin is actually nothing rather than an artificial oxytocin. And it is said that, oh, it's going to speed up the labor. No, it doesn't speed up the labor. It's actually going to lead to an excessive work for the uterine itself, the uterus muscles. And when that works so hard, it can even lead to uterus ruptures sometimes. So one has to be very careful about making this kind of decisions when they are in this situation. This can actually cause a fatal distress, uterine rupture, or any kind of other ailment that you don't even want to name at this time. All right, here is the game breaker. They have tried all of these things, and then it doesn't work as they want it to be. It's going to be labeled what? Failure to progress. Yes, failure to progress. So many a times when I teach students, I tell them many a times that failure to progress is a lack of patience. Failure to progress is actually the fact that they touch too much than they should do. Failure to progress is being impatient, is doing things that you're not supposed to do. The ultimate thing that will be done in this case when there's failure to progress is still the ultimate thing that they would suggest to you at this time is going to be what we call cesarean. It's one thing I don't like so much. I'll be very honest about it. But then, it is there. Is there something I can do about it? No, but I'm sure you can. Here is a spoiler, a little bit about paperwork. Midwife, doctors, nurses are forced to do all the paperwork when the woman is in labor. So the woman stands up to pee, you write it down. And while this is very, very important for you as a midwife for defensive charting, if that interests you, make sure to click on the link below, or just write me a short message and I'll send you a link on defensive charting. And this is for all nurses and midwives. That being said, when you put labor on a paper all the time, what happens is you need an exact time that the labor started. You need to have the first and second stage of labor, and in general, everything that happens postpartumly. Is this good or bad? Would you have enough time to care for the mother? Does this mean that nurses and midwives would have to be leaving their duty posts and then be attending to this paperwork? These are some things that makes me want to wonder sometimes, that have we become secretaries or administrative staffs? Sometimes that's how it feels like. Here is the reality. Sometimes midwives actually fudge these numbers to protect the women from interventions. We have no choice sometimes, right? So we have to do some things to make sure that there is no intervention taking place in this woman, right? Although nowadays they have the echography and all of that they can use to measure the exact time. But I'll tell you the truth. If birth times were recorded accordingly, exactly the way it should be, the system would collapse. I guarantee you that. Often, most of these times are also made up. I'm sorry to say that, but it is what it is. And finally, this is a way by which we can justify that the system is literally broken. Don't you think? And the system is literally broken. And it's actually not meant to serve us. We have to understand that the system is doing what it's meant to do and not to serve us. Therefore, how can we change the future of birth? For every mother, what I tell them is make sure you are asking questions to avoid every unnecessary intervention. It's also very important for you to understand that birth or labor is not a race that you have to run. Take your time. For every birth assistant, I would say you should teach the women on the true natural birth. And really stop the whole promotion of the policy according to our hospital, according to our protocol. Our body is not a machine to have a protocol. And for the hospitals, maybe it's time to stop using the protocol as it's not even evidence-based and stop the whole strict rules when it comes to the labor time. I do believe that it is time for us as people to trust our bodies and not the clock. Wow, I'm sure this was a conversation that you needed. For me, it's a very powerful conversation. It took me a while to know if I want to say these things. Hey, make sure you tag a friend and let us spread the truth about birth. Make sure also to follow me on Inner Compass on my Instagram page, my YouTube page. Until next time, trust your baby, trust your body, and trust your birth. See you soon.